I'm working on an art project involving this piece of, I think it's spalted maple. The idea here is I've got this square of plywood, and that's not going to be part of the project. I'm just using it as a reference. And I'm going to put this on my square and kind of position it where I'm happy. And then over on this other part, I want to do, well, you've already seen the thumbnail, so you know better than I do how this is going to turn out. But some kind of scrap wood thing here, over here, and then I'm going to connect the two the same way same idea that I did with this previous project, with these sort of curved slats running in between the gaps. Also got another one, this piece of cherry crotch. This limb was already cut off, I think, when they cut the tree down. So it was kind of an awkward piece to use, and it's been kind of sitting around. I already used the part that was up here for something else. And so this has been sitting around. I had this crack over here, which I've already filled with epoxy. And so all I had to do to get this to fit here was trim a little bit off of the two ends and this off of the end. So it was already pretty much this shape. So it's just kind of worked out that this fits what I'm trying to do here. So this, I'm also going to fill in this over here. I'm probably not going to fill in this corner over here because it'd be really small, but maybe, we'll see. Now for the scrap wood, I want to do something sort of like an end grain cutting board, but like with an odd shape. And so I've already processed all of my scraps into these panels, but I'm playing a little bit of a trick on you because these are not panels. These are actually separate pieces still. And the width of these is important in that I've made a unit width. So this is 1, this is double that, this is triple. If you've glued this all into one big block and then you start slicing it, you're going to get that pattern repeating over and over again. I don't want to see any kind of repeating pattern. So rather than gluing these all together now, first I'm going to cross-cut them to an oversized length, and then somehow I'm going to glue them together in some kind of process that I do not know yet. Here I'm checking to see if my unit length adds up to something close to the size of the square, and it's pretty close. And here's all the blocks I've prepared, and I have some extra that I'll leave long in case I need more of a specific length. Looking at the cookie and how much space there is left for the other part, I don't think there's enough of a balance between the two once you allow for a gap between them. I really don't want to cut off any of this beautiful spalted wood, but it does have the pith in it, so it would make some sense to cut that part off. Because the lengths are multiples of the width, I can have these blocks running either direction. You've probably seen chaos-style end-grain cutting boards before. With those, you still end up with rows that are glued together, so they really aren't that chaotic when you really get down to it. What I'm doing here allows for a pattern with no rows. Well, yesterday was an interesting day. Really, the highs and the lows of doing any kind of creative work. So I reached the point where I was going to cut down this slab to make the balance better, and I was kind of sad that I was ending up with all this waste. And then I had this thought that, what if instead of the cherry one being the match for this, what if I did a mirror image of this in reverse? So the end grain cutting board kind of part we made out of this, plus other stuff like this, and I would get a walnut cookie, so it'd be a mirror image in reverse. And then I was really hating myself for coming up with that idea because I really liked that idea, but I don't have that walnut cookie, and that's not something that you can just go to the lumberyard and it's going to be there and you can just buy it today. And I've got this project all ready to go. I've done all the prep work to get it and where I could just get this thing done. And now I've come up with this idea that's just going to stall it for some indefinite period while I track down this cookie, from eBay or whatever, and then when I actually do find it, it's going to have to acclimate to the shop, and it's going to be like months before I can actually get this project done now. But then I remembered that I have these walnut cookies that are smaller, and I was actually going to use these for a project similar to what I'm doing with this, with the connecting it with the little slats. But there's no rule that says my mirror image has to be exactly the same. So what if I take these smaller ones and just sort of connect them like this? I can get a similar shape. It's just, 3 pieces instead of 1 piece. And, there are no rules here. I can do whatever I want. And, it's art. So somebody's going to, look at this thing and, try and divine some sort of reason for why there's, 1 and 3. And, it's white and it's black. It's a racial thing. It's a commentary on social issues of, we're all connected because there's 1, but then there's 3, and they're all connected. But then the spalting, that's the moral decay of, what. I just thought it was going to look cool. Okay? So now I don't hate myself anymore because I've got these. They're dry. I know they're dry. But if I'm going to mill slots into these, I think the bark is going to break off, and I want to keep the bark on. So now I'm thinking that I need to stabilize these, and I don't have the stuff to stabilize it. So now we're back to having to put at least this part on hold. But at least that's, a product that I can go out and buy, and I know where to get it. And I don't have to, acclimate the vacuum pump to the shop for a week. So I'm feeling good again, right? So then I move on to starting to glue together this end grain thing. And there's a huge problem, of course. The 3-unit length pieces are just a smidge too short. And it's just enough that it's a problem that I can't ignore. They're maybe 10 or 15 thousandths of an inch too short, and it's just enough that you can see it. And I have to deal with that somehow. So behind me is every clamp in the world. I took all the extra that I had, and I cut those to length, and I've glued on a piece of veneer to each one of them, and I wiped off all the squeeze out so it would be easy to trim those with a knife to size. Now the veneer is twice the thickness of what I needed to make up, so I'm going to have to trim them all to the right size. The glue up is tricky, working from one corner in stages and trying to always be able to clamp everything in both directions. Occasionally I had to add in a piece of veneer to make up for any gaps that developed. And then I got to do it all again with the maple version. Finally, my stabilizing gear came in, and here's the fun part of the video. It does that for hours and hours. So here's where things took a turn. In order to cure the stabilizing resin, you have to bake it at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I got a toaster oven that was big enough to fit the cookies, but it only goes down to 250 degrees. I thought I'd be able to turn it down lower than that, but no matter how low you turn the knob, it stays at 250. And the wood cracked. A few bigger cracks, but the whole surface is just covered with small cracks. So that was pretty disappointing. I did this in the middle of winter when it's really dry in the shop, so I thought it would be okay. But if I had known, maybe I could have jury-rigged some kind of kiln that would dry it out more gently first. But you don't know until you try, and Well, so that was pretty disheartening, and I kind of checked out of the project at that point, though I did finish it, but I didn't do a very good job of recording after that. And so the files have been sitting on my hard drive for 2 years because I couldn't really make a proper ending to the video. But I'm going to try and piece this together the best I can. To fill in some of the larger cracks, I broke off the bark next to the crack so I could pour in epoxy without getting it on the bark, and then glue the bark back on. And considering the whole stabilizing process was so that the bark wouldn't break off, and yet I was able to break the bark off, that just proved that whole process was a waste of time. So even though I was able to fix the cracks, that did not improve my disposition towards the project. But I carried on. I hot glued the parts to that square of plywood and put it in the CNC and used that to flatten it and cut the slots for the strips. The strips are a bent lamination of 3 layers, and I thought those would bend easily enough to get them in, but some of the curves were just too tight, and so I had to soak them in water and then let them dry on a bending form. Past Kevin managed to get footage of me using calipers to show you that the wood had swelled up with the water, but he didn't get any video of me putting the strips into the project. Great job, Kevin. So I got them trimmed up and sanded, and then I put them on a shelf for 2 years because I had 2 problems that I didn't have a solution to. One of them is I have to make it so a regular person can hang these on the wall. And because because of the gap between the 2 sides, it's like there's 4 different things that have to be in line with each other. So it'd have to be like 4 French cleats, like all perfectly in line. Like, I think that's asking a lot of just a regular person. So if anyone has any ideas, because I still haven't solved that problem. And the other problem was the finish. The only way I thought I would have success is with an oil-based wipe-on poly. It's where I have the most experience. It's thin, it has a long working time, I can get in all the nooks and crannies without having runs all over the place. But it's going to make the maple yellow, and I don't want it to be yellow. So I was just stuck with what to do. But I've gone ahead and just done it, because yellow is better than sitting on a shelf for the rest of my life, unfinished. And this video is going to bomb worse than my stabilizing attempt, which is a shame, because I think this is one of my most successful art projects. But no one's going to see it.